This evening's Dharma talk is titled Two Projections. Two projections. A projection, well, first the number two. It's two. Number two. Then projections. The way I'm using projection here is when we project, instead of seeing what's in front of us, just for what it is, simply, very simply what it is, we project our ideas, our opinions, our beliefs, and our presumptions onto that. Very, very subtle, very difficult to see that we do that. It's because it's convincing. We're looking at what we think is there rather than what is there. And so I'm going to comment on that a little bit. But just so you'll know, the other of the two projections is when you're projecting this way about what you think is here, what you think is. This is both of them are difficult. The one this direction might create more problems for yourself. So, how do we see that? How do we know if what we're seeing is actually what is there, or it is something that we're inventing or making up, projecting onto something? That's difficult. This is where the sitting practice of meditation comes in, where strengthening the part of the mind that just receives. Thinking process doesn't receive anything. And when you start thinking about anything, all the doors, windows, all the shutters slam shut, you just think about things. Think it over. Should I do this? Should I do that? Did he mean this? What did she mean about what I said? For that matter, what did I think about what she thought that I said that she meant? That may sound silly, but we actually do that. If you watch your thought process, you'll see that you actually take several different positions on everything and keep switching around. We do it all the time. If you know that you're doing that, then the next big problem is trying to stop it. Big mistake. Don't do it. It's in this tradition. If you're looking at this path, if you're interested in this path, this is not a particular thinking or controlling or manipulating path. You're not trying to get yourself into a higher realm, a stronger being. Maybe you're trying to become more aware, possibly. You're trying to do anything. But it is rather about seeing the way in which we keep making up shit. We keep inventing. It's very difficult for the ego mind, for the self-centered mind, to look at something and not know what it is without thinking up. We take, guesswork, speculate. Well, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, maybe. Well, what if it's, and then we start getting afraid that what if it's this? I better start protecting myself. You all know what I'm saying here. I have no doubt. And so what I'm promoting, I guess you could say, is if this is interesting to you, if it seems to resonate with some part of you that wants to know, that you want to know more deeply what this is, you can actually do this yourself. Your own awareness will help you see what is fundamentally true, transcending every philosophy in the world, every speculation, every bit of science, all of that stuff. I'm not saying you're going to be able to levitate, although maybe. If you do, let me know. I don't know how to do that myself. So how does the awareness work to do that? What the awareness does is if you watch the thought that that is coming up about any given thing, any given topic, and you watch it, you do nothing with it, you don't increase it, you don't decrease it, you don't distract yourself from it or look away, you don't add to it. Like I said, you don't increase it or you don't make commentaries, you do nothing with it, but just watch it. It will begin to reveal itself. It's going to take some time. It won't show up as some kind of discovery particularly, maybe a little bit. It's more the way it shows up, and this is why it is such a challenge for ego that wants to know, wants to be right, wants to have a reference point. It can show up as just a continuous feeling of not knowing what's going on. The spiritual path is all about letting that occur, about don't meddle with it. This particular spiritual path. There might be other spiritual paths that want you to meddle. I don't know. So by doing this, we're able to see the actual mechanics of how something arises we don't like. We try to tamp it down, or we have an opinion about it, or else we start guessing where it came from, or why is it there? That's why I often say, you've heard me say, and I'm saying again, why questions are circular. They're circular because if you say why, it's not that you can't say why, a little bit, but quite often what we do is we say why, and then we get a because, and then why is that, and then because of that, why, because, why, because, why, because, why, because. It goes just like this. And we go in circles. Have you noticed? We don't really get anywhere with those. A little bit, but not enough to solve sometimes a deep anxiety that might be going on that doesn't seem to have any source to it at all. Or maybe the anxiety that that does seem to be caused by this or that given situation. Even if it seems to be caused by this or that, look very closely and don't settle. Don't settle for a response. Don't settle for something because, well, at least now I know, then now I can go on to some other thing. It seems to be quite important to spend time strengthening the awareness, sitting on the cushion, and observing what continues to move in any of the six sense fields, including the mind. Just watch. If you do that, then the observer part of the discontinuous identity of this whole matrix we call a living being, a living consciousness, an awareness, it starts to get stronger. If you just look, just listen, just smell, taste, touch, think, with nothing extra, you just hear. This is what's called meditation, at least in this tradition. There are other things that are called meditation that have nothing to do with this. They have to do with trying to get better, trying to feel better, trying to be blissful, trying to reach some kind of higher state of consciousness. This is, to put it bluntly, horse manure. It's just my opinion, of course. And that being said, I certainly wouldn't presume to take away from any meditation teacher or their students or anything and by saying, oh, they shouldn't be, they're wrong, they should be. No, they should be. If you're doing it, probably you should be doing it. I wouldn't go in and lobby for anything. I would not give you any propaganda particularly at all about why you should do this. I'm not here to sell you this. If you're in the room listening, probably should listen, at least for the next 45 minutes. And then I also often say, don't believe a word I say. Don't believe it. Don't disbelieve it. Don't do anything with it. Listen, but then just let it sit there. If it starts to slide away, don't reach for it. If it starts to get larger, don't tamp it down. No matter what happens, don't meddle. If you want to see the truth fundamentally for yourself, so that you don't have to concern yourself any longer with other people's opinions, ideas about who you are, what you're doing, what's valuable, what's not valuable, what's true, what's not true. You want that for yourself? Strengthen the awareness so you can see it for yourself. So you can see and you will have no doubts. Even your doubts will have no doubts, which is nice. So there's more to be said about projecting out onto, my goodness, my badness. There's all kinds of things to be said about all the things that are going on in the world that we project onto. We think something happens, we immediately have thoughts of plus, minus, negative, neutral about any given situation. Some of them are so incredibly seductive that you can't hardly help. You can't help but make up extra stuff about that. And if that occurs, if spontaneously this happens, that happens, and you immediately jump into that with a response based on, you could say, a knee-jerk reaction, or a fear reaction, or a disappointment reaction, or any of those, do nothing with it. There's nothing to correct. If you think there's something to correct, well, it doesn't really make that sound, but it actually does that. It's called samsara, round and around and around. The Tibetan word is korlo. It's a wheel of around, birth, death, birth, death, birth, death. Nothing wrong with it, just circular. Just a particular way that it works. Yes, sir.
When we're meditating, how can we see the projection of that which is observing?
You may not when you're meditating. You may, the meditation part is the part where you're actually sharpening the awareness. You know, it may be rather boring, maybe nothing will happen, or maybe it will. You could actually have, some kind of samadhi, or seeing non-duality, or seeing no self, or seeing no other, you could have some tremendous insight into the fundamental nature of reality, as it has been said. But probably not much is going to happen, and when things will happen, if you want to use that word, or occur, is when you're washing dishes, or when you're going for a walk, or when you're at the hardware store buying a padlock. That something about that starts to show up as, my way of saying it is not separate. More.
When we're sitting still and watching what moves, there's different thoughts, stories, and emotions that come up. Is that which is seeing that also a fabrication?
So you're talking about, you're watching something and then you turn the awareness back to see the watcher? Are you finding anything? Are you finding a watcher?
If we're seeing...
are you finding a watcher? You do that? You find yourself?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But if we're seeing objects,
Okay.
Isn't that in contrast to something else? Isn't there some sort of separation that's occurring there?
So the way this is talked about in the tradition that underlays the Zen, Chan and Zen teachings, or mind-only teachings, is the Vijnanavada, or the Yogacara teachings, mind-only, which is basically saying perception only, consciousness only. So it's just the consciousness that is there, which is not separate. There really isn't an observer, and there really isn't anything observed. It's just the perception only. So the perception is happening, but it's not separate from the the observer part, or the perceiver part, or the perceived part. Those seem like, I'm over here, it's over there, and the illusion is further cranked up by the distance there is between the eye and the object that the light is bouncing off from. So there's some kind of separation going on, but it's not as separate as we assume it is. It's not so separate that we can suddenly build fences and have territory and have me being separate than you, and so on. Go ahead.
Can we see no self if we're still seeing another?
How do you mean?
Can there be no observer but still seeing objects separate?
Yes, you can. In the Tibetan tradition, it's called sosotarpa, or individual liberation, moksha. It's sosotarpa means 1.5-fold egolessness. So you can see that there's no self, but still be attached to some kind of other out there. So it's not, it's happening, it's happening. You can see there, there's no one here. But if we look out there, we see people, we see beings, and we see their suffering, or maybe they're not suffering. We see another world, but when we look back and try to see anybody here, we can't find anything. So, yes.
What is it that is able to see the other? That there's no self here, but there's something there. What is it that allows that to still occur?
How does it, what sees no self? What sees no self is the same thing that sees no other.
Can we see,
It's just,
can we see no self?
what you see is there isn't anything there. So if you call it, see, it's not seeing anything, it's like there isn't anything there to see. There's not a solid, you can see the discontinuity, you can see there's some kind of discontinuous situation happening, but there's no like identity that there was 6 months ago or 6 years ago or whenever. There's no solid self. And this feeling when this can first come about can be scary before it actually happens. It can be very scary.
Is it the discontinuous self that is seeing the discontinuous self?
Not really.
And what?
Yeah.
What is it? What is it that sees that?
So, we're getting into, for one thing, I would like to say right now that in all the traditions say that there's no way this can even be talked about. You can't, you understand, but you can't hardly put it into words. And there have been people who have understood this. It's sometimes taken them years to be able to find out a way to put this into words and actually teach this in such a way that doesn't get in the way of the person's awakening, that doesn't actually obstruct it. Each person you have to really respect each person's confusion. You have to respect where they're at. If you see the confusion, just respect. They may have to just, until they turn to you and say, help me, or something, until they give you permission, you can't. That's why this is a non-theistic tradition and there's no proselytizing here. We don't go out and march around with tracts like my grandmother did. When I was 5 years old, we used to go out and hand out tracts. You know what tracts are? Little slips of paper that have Bible verses on them. And my grandmother used to write those. So back in the 1940s, I would go around with her and she would hand me a stack and I would have a stack, she would have a stack, and we'd walk along and we ran into people. If there was only a few people, I would let her do it, but if there got to be more, then I would start handing out. And they said things like, Jesus loves you, and various kinds of things about the Bible and so on. Yes?
Can we have thoughts without projections?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thoughts just come and go. They just tumble. They're like, we just receive them like we do sounds. We don't have to do anything with them. It's the grasping and the rejection. It's the polarization that starts to create problems and issues, that brings up hope and fear, passion and aggression, and just getting worried about what's happening and inventing things. The other kind of projection is when we project this direction and we think there is somebody. We think there's a bad person, a good person, a successful person, a failure, a jealous person. We can go on and on. And the realization, as far as I know, it always happens, if it's going to happen in order of this and that, we see this is not there first. We see there's no solid self in the skandhas. Form, feeling, perception, concept or thinking process, and consciousness as the sixth sense feels in their objects. That does not add up to a me, even though we say me, and I can still go into a store and not get confused about who I am. I can still order a cup of coffee. have my wife pay for it. So you could say along the lines of what you were asking, it's consciousness itself that is not separate. Consciousness doesn't belong to anyone. It really feels like it does. But here we are, we have all these sense fields operating and the objects coming in, sight, sounds, taste, touch, thoughts coming and going, so it kind of reifies or cranks up some kind of, there must be somebody actually having these feelings. You know, the feelings are there. The body is here. There's a body. But who you are is who we actually are is not just this body. This body can come and go. Who you actually are can't do it. It doesn't do anything. Ultimately. Ultimately, in other words, ultimately. I guess that was the same words. Yes, Bailey.
You said if we just observe, whatever we're observing will start to reveal itself.
Yes,
What will it reveal itself as?
not separate. The more you look at something that looks like a separate object, and if you push on it, it stirs up the silt on the bottom of the pond. If you pull on it, it does the same thing. It shifts into, it starts to function like a relative kind of world, relative truth. Plus and minus, up and down, back and forth, success and failure, life and death. You want the extreme version. So, but if you do nothing with it, which is what the sitting practice of meditation is about, is training you to quit meddling with everything. And of course, you've got all kinds of propaganda and all kinds of things about, well, you're just gonna sit there and face the wall and the world is coming apart and you need to come out and you need to do this and you need to do that. No, you don't. You train your mind. You've been around here for countless eons. This consciousness is appearing as this particular little tiny individual right now, like a grain of sand in the middle of the Mojave or the Sahara. We're just little tiny dots of consciousness, incredible dots of consciousness that are sovereign. So I say trust yourself. If you need to go out and do some great thing in the world, then I'm not going to stop you. If you came to me and say, Sokuzan, I want to climb Mount Everest. I either want to climb Mount Everest or I want to come here and sit and meditate and face the wall the rest of my life, or for the next maybe 10 years. What do you think I should do? What would I say? Climb Mount Everest. No, I would say, I don't know. What do you think you should do? How does it look to you? And I wouldn't stop you from doing anything. I would not lobby to change I would not interfere with your personal karma. You know what you need to do. I'm not going to get in the way of that. That being said, if you come here and say, I want help to train, I want to train my mind so I can see the truth myself, then I would say, I probably can help you. And the way in which I do that, if you live here, you know what I'm talking about. Sit down, look at the wall, train your mind, see what moves, day after day, week after week, month after month, until you see the truth, without a doubt. Sent you.
What is it that fabricates and invents things?
It's a paranoia that comes from the way consciousness works. It can be fearful of change, fearful of something new, fearful of being the solid feeling we have of being someone being destroyed, death. But it's just consciousness doing that. It's consciousness that hasn't realized its true nature or its true face, hasn't seen its face before your parents' birth. If you know who you are, you see your consciousness, you see it. It's you don't have doubts. In the Tibetan tradition, it's called the torch of certainty. completely, it's not like an opinion. It's like hot water's not an opinion. Cold water's not an opinion. You know it. And even though someone else has never had their hand in hot water, if they haven't, there's no way you can tell them. There's no way you can say that. All you can do is say that you have to feel it for yourself. You have to see it yourself. And yes, Suzanne.
Is our karma separate from the things we move in relationship to?
No. Karma is a Sanskrit word that means action, and everything is kind of moving everywhere all the time. Our emotions, our thoughts, our feelings, our opinions, our ideas, other people and theirs and their projections about us, our projections about them, or maybe our lack of projections is also there's an aspect there. So this is why it seems to be so important for all of us to, whether you're a Buddhist or not, or whether if you ever come in this room again or not, is to sit down and find out who you are. Find out who you are on a really deep level, down where it starts to get kind of scary or stuffy or difficult. Go down there and make friends with that. Make friends with that deep, in that deep consciousness. Go down there and make friends with that. Yes, sir?
What do you mean when you say make friends with that which is difficult?
Warfare is difficult, and if you're having warfare and you can find a way to cover that up, most people will cover it up with partying, drugs, some way to keep from looking at that. And the cycle of this difficulty will rise and get really difficult on, January the 28th, and then suddenly it just backs off for no apparent reason. It just goes down. And then of course, we can't let it just do that. We'll come up with ideas why that happened. Well, that must be because, the moon squared my natal Venus or something, which that may be true. But to speculate about it is more circularity, and it doesn't really get us anywhere. It's not, even if it's correct, even if there's some kind of accuracy there, it just gives us a bunch of information that we can further mix it up, more. I was saying more because I need help. Bailey. Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just thinking the term making friends with, and what does it mean to be friends with your karma or friends with your negativity?
So it's basically the idea there is quite often everybody recognizes, I use this kind of image all the time of, we walk around and we have maybe a smiley face on, but something's not so good. And we don't know what it is, and sometimes we project it's because of that, or them, or him, or her, or my job, or my whatever, what my mother did to me, or my father, whatever. We feel that, or we blame ourselves deep inside. I need to be able to stop this. We go to war with war. There's already the war that's there, which is your karma. And sometimes it gets so bad that we want out. We want to end this. We don't want to suffer. Well, no one wants to suffer, of course, but sometimes it gets so intense that people actually take their lives. I've known many people to take their lives. I wanted to do that myself at one time. Not easy. It's difficult. You get really close to it, and then something happens. The phase of the moon changes, or somebody calls you, or you just chicken out, or do whatever may occur. And then hopefully or luckily, you may run into a way of doing this. You may stumble into a meditation hall somewhere and sit down and decide, I'm going to see what this is, or whatever may be. And what you probably end up looking at is wham, wham. But if you don't give up, if you say, I'm gonna look at that until I see what it is, have some stubbornness about it, transcendental stubbornness. I'm going to look at that. I'm not going to settle for any halfway idea about it. I'm going to go and see what that is. If you have that kind of resolution, you're probably going to have some realization around that. So that's the beginning making friends. Sometimes looks like this. If you did this kind of thing, and this is what you're looking at. As you look at it, you'll find that you've actually stopped fueling it. And when you stop fueling it, it starts to look like this. Part of the momentum keeps going on to create suffering or difficulty, but there's no resistance to it anymore. So therefore, this starts to slow down. Just a way of talking about it. No guarantees. That may not happen at all for you. Yes?
How is karma warfare?
It isn't, if you don't object to it. As Sakyong Mipam Rinpoche, one of my teachers, said once, and I'm quoting him all the time because I think it's such a great thing for him to say. He says, I don't know how well it came up, his preamble to this, but his basic statement was, this is your karma ripening. You know, so your things are happening. This is, what about this? Oh, what about this relationship or that? Or my job, lost my job. It's your karma ripening. So your karma, whatever's happening, the way I like to say that is, whatever you're thinking, whatever's happening to you, is exactly what needs to happen. Even if somebody is hurting you, I'm not validating them, justifying it. I'm saying that you're going through whatever you need to go through. And luckily, not because I'm such a wonderful fellow, but luckily you stumbled into a place where the emphasis is on what? You finding out who you are. It's not a belief system. There's nothing to believe here. If it helps you to believe in the Buddha, go ahead. I don't believe or disbelieve in any of it. Therefore, I'm able to teach what the Buddha taught. Nothing is separate. Everything is dependently arisen. And also the four marks of existence. Life is suffering, or discontent. Everything is impermanent. Anything that comes into being is passing out of being. All compounded things will vanish. That's the second one. The next one is there is no solid self in the skandhas. There is no solid being or ego anywhere. So nothing to fight with. And the fourth one is called peace, or the fundamental nature of reality is completely quiescent and at rest. If you discover it, yes.
How is thought dependently arisen?
How is thought dependently arisen? Because one thought leads to another. You have that thought, then another thought happens. Then another thought happens. More? Yes.
Anna Maria from New York,
Is she still in New York? Or
or
is she
where,
in Florida?
wherever she is.
Florida? Providence, Rhode Island?
She asks, where is the habitual / residual momentum after you've stopped fueling warfare coming from? What is that energy?
And it goes back into the center of the sun. Look to be funny. Where does that energy go? It just settles. The energy is objecting to something, or agreeing by grasping at something. Yes, I want that. No, I don't want that. It's this little tiny self-centeredness of insisting on having our way. We want our way. It's difficult because the whole world around us is constantly yammering at us. The commercials and everything is say, you should do, and you should have, and you should go, and you should go there, have this, do this. It's complicated.
A question from Patrick out in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
He asks, actually 2 questions. How does strengthening awareness affect thoughts and feelings? And then, is awareness space?
What was the first part of that? The last part kind of made me space out.
How does strengthening awareness affect thoughts and feelings?
So how does strengthening the awareness affects thoughts and feelings? So the spacious part is what happens. Awareness is space, basically. It's just room. Awareness is not a thing. It's just the dynamic that accommodates, to describe it in some way, and it accommodates the thoughts and the feelings. There's just a lot more space. I like to say, when you're realized, there's still thoughts and feelings still come, except instead of coming into your broom closet mind, you know, where you're not only paranoid, but you're claustrophobic, it enters your mind that is in being in a large field or a pasture. Plenty of room for all kinds of negative thoughts can come and go. They're like birds. You see them, you may feel them, but you don't grasp at them, you don't reject them, because there's all kinds of room. It's called generosity. It's called compassion. Bailey?
Is everything that we're looking at just a projection?
It's a way of talking about it, because if you see what is there, it's not separate, so then you see yourself. It sounds kind of corny to say that, because, you know, I don't really see myself. I don't look as bad as that person does. Or, you know, what do you mean by see myself? I mean, they're over there, I'm over here. So, more?
What happens to the projections?
Yeah. Like air in a balloon. I'd like to do something like that and see if anybody's frowning.
Is anybody frowning?
Huh?
Is anybody frowning?
Yeah, but I'm not going to say who it was. But they were frowning because they were actually thinking about something else, much more important than what I'm doing. Yes.
From William up in Grand Rapids.
Yes, William.
He asks, how can not separate be contrasted if it is the truth?
Contrasted with what? You have a red phone? I thought you had a
No,
light
Williams is red.
phone. Oh, Williams is.
His messages are red.
Hmm.
I'm reading them now.
Reading what?
His messages.
What did he say?
He's got Moodles sharing the room, so he thought he might have
Moodles.
missed your.
Moodles is his daughter. Moodles. Rhymes with noodles. You knew that, yeah. So, what was the question?
He asks, how can not separate be contrasted if it is the truth?
There is no contrast left. The contrast is gone. And even the contrast that comes up has no contrast to it. So nothing would happen if there weren't beings who were clutching at a self or suffering. There wouldn't be anything going on at all. Further questions? Yes? No? Apparently I've made myself very clear. Zan.
If there's not a solid self, then what are you making friends with?
It's just the process. Once you've made friends, there isn't anything. You're just making friends with you're taking an attitude towards the negativity that you're not going to run away from it anymore. You're not going to make excuses for it anymore. And you're not going to close it off. You're not going to fight with it. You're not going to do anything with that, but you're going to get to know that. You're going to go down into that, the texture of that feeling. Texture means space. You can't have like carpeting. If you don't have any space in the carpeting, you have linoleum, or tile. There's no space in it. There's no nap. So, but emotions, if you notice, if you drew a picture if you take one of your negative emotions and drew a picture of it, it probably would have some kind of spacious quality to it. So you have space between. You can't have fingers without space. But quite often we ignore the space and everything and just grasp at the fingers, no pun intended. So the idea is to bring the awareness down into the negativity and see that rather than it being a lump of burning coal, that's actually very, very spacious. There's a lot of room for not only for a consciousness to penetrate down into that, but to loosen that up and make friends with that. To not going to war with war like the whole world is doing so much of that today, and even those whose politics or whatever are have a peace or kindness and all a base, still they can get extremely warlike when they're upset, and it just plays back into the same situation. So less is better. Less is better. Don't do anything unless you have to. This is another way of describing patience. Just hold still. If somebody wants to blame you of being a pacifist, let them. Don't. You don't have to fight. You don't have to justify anything. You could say, yeah, I could see why you would think that. Since you're doing so much and I'm doing nothing. Yes.
Oh, Rochig down in Florida?
Rochig, I haven't heard from him in 15 years. Is he still alive? He's in there somewhere. Rochig.
He asks, what if one doesn't want to be compassionate?
Well, then don't. Did I say that the right way? Don't. Then don't. Don't do it. If you really mean that, if you really don't want to do that, then live your life. I'm not here to lobby for anything. I don't know what you or anyone else needs to do with their life. I just know that from my understanding of working at this for a long time, it is not my business what you do with your life unless you come and ask me, unless you give me permission, unless you come and say, I want help. I want to help with what's happening with my life or what's happening to me. But if you say, I want to be compassionate, well, then work with that. Even that is awareness. Think of the awareness that it takes to even say such a thing. No, not a compliment here, my friend. But think of the awareness that it takes to say, what if I don't want to feel that way? I don't want to be compassionate. Of course, what's the issue here? He thinks he knows what compassion is. And yes, that is an accusation, Rochik. I'm accusing you of not knowing something. If you knew him, you'd see how he's got that coming. Yes, Bailey.
What is compassion?
Feeling with. Passion is feeling, and calm is feeling with. Not feeling for, not a condescension of poor little person needs help, but actually resonating. If you resonate with another's feelings, you may not be able to do anything at all. You may be suffering in such a way that you can't do anything about it. But compassion is very, very powerful. Very powerful. And a person may be having compassion for you and you won't even know it because they're not operating in the conventional sense of, oh, I'm so sorry you're feeling bad. Quite often the person who is worried about how you're feeling or something like that, it's more about them wanting to be a compassionate person rather than actual compassion. Actual compassion is not like necessarily. I'm not saying it can't be kind or sweet, but it's not necessarily all that sweet. Because if I'm working with somebody that I know that they are operating in such a way that I don't even know how to say it because it's not something I think up. I can't look at it like think how to be compassionate. If you're thinking how to be compassionate, this might be closer to sympathy than actual compassion. Actual compassion is without a self. It would have to be. Because if you have a self, then you're concerned about your identity of you being compassionate. Or you're being this, or you're being that. Very, very fishy area for ego. Ego's notorious. Ego's notorious. Shall I say it again? Notorious for being without end. It just goes on and on and on until you see it's unreal. And when it's unreal, you don't have to get rid of it. It's just unreal. There isn't anybody there. Unless there is, of course, that's the problem with the whole thing. Further questions? We're almost up to 9 o'clock. Yes, Suzanne?
Is working with others suffering any different than working with our own?
I'd say it's pretty similar. Is I would say be very go slow and try to understand when you look at your own suffering. Look at what it is. Look as deeply as you can without trying to remove it, without trying to justify it, without medicating ourselves or doing anything to get in the way of it. But have a willingness, a bravery, you could say, to just or even maybe you're just at the end of your rope. You've tried everything else. Okay, now let's just look at the damn thing. Let's sit down day after day. And what we do is we meditate, we hold still, and this has been called voluntary suffering. You sit down, you look at it until you see what it fundamentally is. And so your own situation and that of working with others is very, very similar. So first, it'd be a good idea to start here. This is why I often say, before you go out on some kind of a march into the world to save the world, based on your ideas, assumptions, presumptions about everything, first lose the war in your gut. Lose it. Lose the war. Stop fighting with everything. Because if you don't, if you have uninspected aggression that's deep down, then when you go out into the world, that aggression will come up and very likely will laminate itself to aggression that's already there and make it worse. And you'll see that you're not only fighting with the aggression that was already the case, you're fighting with your own aggression, which is laying on top of it. So if you've solved if you've seen through the suffering here and the difficulty of the warfare here, then when you go out and you see others at war, even if they're attacking you, you actually see it, because you've seen it clearly here, you see that the reason they're doing that is they're so unhappy. They're not doing that because they're not, even though they're pointing at you, they don't know who you are. They're acting that way or accusatory, or they're trying to fight with you because they're suffering so much. And so this is where compassion starts to arise. Further questions? Very good, thank you so much.
We'll dedicate the merit in the back of red pamphlets. And I'd like to bring your attention to the donation boxes that are in the hallway. We appreciate and can always use your financial help.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jiro san shi shihu shison musa moko sa moko ja orobi. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita.
O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, its buildings, garden, and all adjoining areas from any and all dark or negative energy. Remove and dissolve any negative energy or devices. Fill everything and everyone with light. Please shield and protect with light our teachers, monks, students, and all practitioners of the Dharma, our families and friends from negative forces and energy from now on. Help us to realize the truth of the Buddha's teachings.